The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, The X Factor. No, I'm not talking about television shows, I'm talking about a phenomenon called the supernormal. In this episode of Satansplain, we'll take a look into the supernormal and how it differs from the so-called supernatural.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. A week or two ago, I got a comment on X from Lex9 Talionis. He said he'd like to hear a discussion on the difference between the supernatural and the supernormal from a satanic perspective. I thought this was a good suggested topic, so I'm going to give my answer and also read a few relevant quotations from the book We Are Satanists by Magistra Templi Rex Blanche Barton. And the quotations come from Anton LaVey, as well as High Priestess Peggy Nadramia and the late Magister Neil Smith. Also, I'll read some listener mail in the second half of the show. In summary, as simple as I can put it, the supernatural posits an explanation for some strange event or phenomenon, whereas the supernormal does not. So that's the simplest difference I can give. Now, let's look at the words themselves. Supernatural, let's take that one first. What does that mean? Well, I think most people have a general idea of what supernatural means, but let's break it down. Super and natural. The prefix super means above or over or beyond, and natural means nature, the natural world. Now, you have to be careful here because natural has a couple of different meanings. Sometimes natural refers to anything that hasn't been made by humans. So there are natural sweeteners, for example, like sugar or honey, and there are artificial sweeteners like sucralose or saccharin. Does that make Diet Coke supernatural? No, because when we say supernatural, we're using another meaning of natural, and that is the natural world. Anything and everything we can objectively observe or detect. Things we could explain by the laws of physics or the laws of chemistry, for example. So the supernatural are things allegedly beyond the natural world. Now, compare this to supernormal. Grammatically, that would mean beyond the normal. And again, you got to be careful with your use of words here. Is a person who is 7 feet tall supernormal? Well, I think abnormal would be a more accurate word in that context. But when we talk about supernormal, we mean some experience or phenomenon that seems outside of our normal day-to-day life. Something outside of the mundane. Something that perhaps feels particularly moving or significant to us, but that we can't readily explain. Maybe something that we feel we just can't quickly dismiss as coincidence. Strange and abnormal, but something a bit beyond that. Supernormal. So getting back to the supernatural, we've all heard claims about supernatural deities being able to answer prayers or perform miracles. We've heard claims about supernatural powers like psychic ability or auras or human souls, crystal healing energy, and all that stuff. And a lot of that comes down to attaching an unfounded explanation to something, namely an unfalsifiable explanation. Now, when I say unfalsifiable, I don't mean true. I mean something that doesn't lend itself to be tested against. For example, a Christian may say, well, I prayed to Jesus that my father's cancer would go away, and it did. So obviously that means prayer works, and that there's a God who has supernatural healing powers, and blah, blah, blah. And a skeptic like myself may hear that and say, okay, but there are all these other people who had cancer and had people praying for them, and they still died. So if prayer works, then how do you explain that? And you'll get back an answer like, well, I guess it was part of God's will. Or, well, maybe the person praying had other sins they haven't asked forgiveness for, and so on. Okay, so can we talk to God and confirm this? Well, no, you can't, because God is transcendent and invisible. Okay, but you claim he answers prayers, so he must be capable of listening and responding in some way. Can we pray for an answer? Well, no, you can't do that, because you would be testing God, which is blasphemy and mockery. All right. So, in other words, there is no hypothetical scenario that would disprove, in the believer's mind, the claim that these healing prayers objectively work, because the believer can always rationalize some excuse when some contradictory evidence shows up. So, in short, with supernatural claims in general, there is no offered way to distinguish the claim being real from being something that somebody is just making up. So that's what I mean by unfalsifiable. Science, on the other hand, is what we can determine from the scientific method. You start with hypotheses and controlled experiments where you test against those hypotheses. You finally arrive at something that reasonably and consistently explains what's going on. You don't stop with the first explanation you can think of. You try to falsify it. That's how science works. And if it withstands the scrutiny and the rigor, then it becomes science. Now, some mystics try to get smug and say, well, science keeps changing. Or if they're a Christian, they'll say something like, well, science keeps changing, but the Bible has stayed true. So when science says this is true, we don't know, because they may change their answer tomorrow. To which I say, yes, the science changes because scientists find new evidence to refine or replace the old explanations with new ones that fit the new data better. The Bible doesn't stay true. You just find new ways to interpret passages and rationalize away the contradictions when they come up. So it doesn't prove how inerrant the Bible is. It just proves how good at mental gymnastics you as a Christian are with yourself. Now, one final thing I'll say about the supernatural. Personally, I reject the whole notion of the supernatural, because to me, the concept inherently makes no sense. If you observe something or measure something in some kind of objective, quantifiable way, then that's not supernature. That's nature. That's part of the natural world. I know there are skeptic societies like the James Randi Foundation and others who challenge supernatural believers, or believers of the paranormal, to prove their supernatural claim. And if they can, they say they will give them $1 million or whatever the prize is. And so they set up some controlled experiment, and the mystic can never pass it. I remember James Randi saying that most applicants can't even pass the application stage, where they just have to describe clearly what it is they claim they can do, what sort of experiment would disprove it. But in any case, I do have to wonder, if somebody were to somehow prove whatever supernatural power they claim to have, levitation, mind reading, astral projection, whatever it is, I wonder if they did that for one of these skeptic organizations, the skeptic organization would just turn around and say, hey, you proved it, so that means it's not supernatural, it's natural. Well, thanks, but you don't get the money now. But I mentioned skepticism, and this brings us to the other extreme, and that would be not just your average atheist, but let's call him the hardcore atheist, who can be just as smug and annoying as the mystics and say, well, all supernatural stuff is bogus, so anything remotely strange or mystical, like the tarot or astrology or ghost stories, are stupid, and you're stupid for liking them in any way, and oh, you had the strange experience? Well, there obviously must be some logical explanation to it, and even though I wasn't there, I'm going to figure out what it is and tell you. And as I've said before on the show, as a Satanist, I reject both of these extremes. I reject the notion of the supernatural, but I also reject this notion that as an atheist, or I guess you could say even as a naturalist, an empiricist, somebody who rejects the supernatural, that I have to somehow necessarily dismiss and reject anything supernormal. As Satanists, I would say most of us are into the supernormal to some degree or another. We already are pretty abnormal by our nature as people. As Satanists, we're outsiders. We're not necessarily into what's popular. A lot of us are intrigued by strange, out-of-the-ordinary things, not afraid of them. So, as I've said on the show a few times before, I don't see what's wrong with being a Satanist who likes tarot cards or buys a coffee mug with their zodiac sign on it, or likes listening to the Art Bell Show or reading stories about UFOs or allegedly haunted houses. A Satanist can enjoy these sorts of things without investing faith in it. Maybe I like the novelty of my zodiac sign because it lists a bunch of ego-stroking adjectives about me. Maybe I think tarot cards just look cool. Of course, this doesn't necessarily constitute supernormal experiences, because you can like the esoteric or aesthetic or novelty of something strange without having a supernormal experience with it, but again, neither that kind of interest nor having supernormal experiences themselves are the same thing as holding a supernatural belief. You can have a supernormal experience where you just experience it and you don't necessarily attach an explanation to it. As I summarized it near the start of the show, the notion of the supernatural always seems to involve attaching an explanation onto that something, albeit, in my opinion, a bogus explanation. I don't know about you, but I've certainly experienced some things in life that I couldn't explain. Some very strange things that I don't feel comfortable chalking up to being pure coincidence. I don't attach supernatural beliefs to them, but at the same time, I don't dismiss those experiences as insignificant. If they were emotionally moving or fantastical to me, then that's significant for me. Maybe an experience I had can be explained by mere coincidence or psychological explanation. I talked about the law of the trapezoid in Satansplain episode number 50, for example. Are there metaphysical forces and whatnot that science hasn't discovered yet? I don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. Here's what I think it comes down to. The spiritualist mystics, that first extreme, they demand that I take their subjective experiences as objective proof of something supernatural. The hardcore atheist types are demanding objective proof of subjective experiences. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they can both fuck off. I don't care if you don't believe in my experience any more than I would care that you don't like the same music I listen to. I'm under no obligation to prove my musical taste to you, and I'm under no obligation to prove my supernormal experiences to you. If I were claiming things to be supernatural facts that, effectively affect you too, then sure, yes, the burden of proof would be on me to put up or shut up. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Regardless, if you think the only worthwhile experiences you can have in life are the ones that have to be validated by other observers, I don't know what to tell you. Now, please don't confuse me with one of those people who tries to be in the middle and tries to say, well, you don't know with 100% certainty whether this thing is true or not, so the only honest position is to be completely agnostic about it, like me. Now, I'm not advocating to just be compulsively non-committal on everything in life. Those people can be just as smug and fucking annoying as the two extremes they're fancying themselves to be better than. I guess you could call this third type the hardcore agnostic, or really a solipsist. They seem to objectively believe there's only the subjective. So yeah, mystics think their subjective experiences are objective proof of the supernatural. The Reddit Atheists demand objective proof of subjective experiences. And the solipsists take it as objective dogma that everything is subjective. None of those three positions make sense to me. They all sound contradictory to me. We have science to try to answer things in the most empirical and objective way as possible, but frankly, not everything in life is objective enough to lend itself to the scientific method. So let me finish this rant on the supernatural versus the supernormal with some quotations from the book We Are Satanists from Magistra Blanche Barton. The first of these quotations regards the topic of magic, and appropriately enough, because this is the area where I would say Satanists create the supernormal for themselves in more ways than one. As I pointed out back in Satansplain episode number 63, the definition of magic as it's used within the context of Satanism, it's very explicitly given in the Satanic Bible and does not require the belief in the supernatural. So rather than repeat all of that there, I would say if you're interested, go back and listen to episode number 63 or other episodes of Satansplain on the topic of satanic ritual, like episodes number 48 and 49. But now on to the book, We Are Satanists. From the book, We Are Satanists, quote, Anton LaVey maintained a view that magic was, in many ways, simply science that wasn't fully understood or properly quantified yet. Just because it hasn't been fully proven, dissected, and relegated to the mundane and reproducible doesn't mean we shouldn't take full advantage of it. And then it follows up with a quotation from Anton LaVey taken from Arthur Lyon's 1988 book, Satan Wants You. Quote, I don't believe that magic is supernatural, only that it is supernormal. That is, works for reasons science cannot yet understand. As a shaman or magician, I am concerned with obtaining recipes. As a scientist, you seek formulas. When I make a soup, I don't care about the chemical reactions between the potatoes and the carrots. I only care about how to get the flavor of soup I seek. In the same way, when I want to hex someone, I don't care about the scientific mechanisms involved, whether they be psychosomatic, psychological, or whatnot. My concern is how to best hex someone. As a magician, my concern is with effectively doing the same thing, not with the scientist's job of explaining it. Another quote from We Are Satanists comes from Magister Neil Smith. He was a Church of Satan member who sadly passed away this year, but I had the pleasure of meeting him a number of times over the years. From the words of Magister Neil, I don't believe in what the common definition of supernatural implies. The better word I would select would be supernormal, since supernatural suggests something involving a type of spiritual realm or aspect of reality. We believe that this earthly life is the only one there is. We don't believe in gods, demons, angels, or ghosts. We also realize, however, that there are more and more things we are discovering that show the wonderful complexities of nature and of our human brain. There could very easily be legitimate experiences with things we call premonitions, intuitions, perhaps even what we call ESP in ourselves and other animals. For example, Rupert Sheldrake's research into dogs having a sense of when their owners are coming home. But they are not part of a mystical, spiritual dimension. We humans probably possess abilities and faculties we have yet to discover or explore, for which we may not yet have the necessary tools or abilities, but these would be part of our natural carnal abilities. End quote. And third and finally, a quotation from Church of Satan High Priestess Maga Peggy Dremia. Some people inside and outside the Church of Satan have a difficult time reconciling Satanism's firmly skeptical posture with an openness to and utilization of supernatural elements. How do you reconcile these two aspects of Satanism? I don't have to reconcile them because I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in gods, goddesses, spirits, reincarnation, heaven, hell, or an afterlife. I don't believe in anything that is, by its definition, can and must remain beyond the grasp of human understanding. I think such beliefs are irrational and typical of spiritual pipe dreams. I am, however, greatly interested in the supernormal. I am fascinated, for instance, by ghost stories, not because I believe in ghosts, but because human beings appear to experience something that they try to explain as ghosts, and I'm intrigued by the way they talk about it. I'm fairly convinced that extrasensory perception exists because I've experienced it myself, but I think we'll have to name it something else because it clearly isn't extrasensory. It's evidence of a sense, perhaps a sixth sense, our present scientific authorities haven't identified or quantified. And Magna Dremia gives the same example of Sheldrake's work that Magister Neil referenced, but skipping past that, reading the rest of the quote. So when I'm asked about the quote-unquote reconciliation of our practice of greater magic and our disbelief in God, Satan, demons, and angels, I explain that for me there is no conflict. I'm not Benjamin Franklin, but I know how to throw a switch. Unfortunately, the tidbits of news we get to hear about recent discoveries in quantum physics and dark matter, etc., have fed into humanity's irritating need to slide right back into woo-woo beliefs and pie in the sky. Because certain things can or can't be proved, at least not yet, some people settle comfortably into the idea that they needn't prove anything and choose to cling to a certain spiritual concepts, which they select at their own whim. I don't think humans should ever stop trying to learn the truth about our reality, as I'm sure it's stranger, better, and more wonderful than the many fictions our species has created for centuries. And with that, let's take a break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
The Satanic Scriptures hands down the wit, wisdom, and diabolical perspective of the Church of Satan's High Priest, Magus Peter H. Gilmore. These essays, articles, and diatribes have been collected from over 20 years of the High Priest's writings for his infernal cabal, some first issued in the pages of publications available only to insiders. From the magic of toys to techniques of time travel, Magus Gilmore leads the reader down a left-hand path where few will find what they expect. Magus Gilmore reveals principles of satanic ritual in a frank discussion of forbidden rites. What is a satanic funeral? How do Satanists marry? Find out now, as these unholy ceremonies have never been disclosed outside of the Church of Satan's hellish hierarchy. Here is the philosophy for those bold enough to be their own gods or devils.
Visit thesatanicscriptures.com for more information. Released by Scapegoat Publishing. Available in paperback form from major booksellers and independents nationwide.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you're on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, or whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The address is bill@satansplain.com. And if you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browser to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. And thank you, as always, to all of you who are already paid subscribers and support Satansplain. And with that, let's get to some listener mail. Costas wrote me. I gather from his email that English is not his first language, but I appreciate him writing to the best of his ability. Let me read you what he wrote with some of the grammar corrected. Dear Magister Bill, please allow me to congratulate you on your hard work and your spot-on podcasts. You are one of the best members of the Church of Satan, if not the best. Please don't take my comments lightly. You know how to speak and represent all or the great majority of the members. I assume that the vast majority are with you. Just, fair, well-documented, and insider with no disputes. I personally admire you, and I declare that my sword will be by your side when asked and needed. Keep up the good work. A suggestion, please open up the comments on YouTube, etc. They may be painful, but will give you a glimpse of the actual situation. I know that the 11 rules say do not give your advice without being asked, but I took the initiative. After all, what are you afraid of? You will receive comments on emotions, and most of them will be useless, you think. You will clarify who is with you and not. You will get better, I assume. Please do not underestimate me. Thank you for your guidance. Hail Satan. I and many others are with you. So I thanked Costas very much for this overwhelming praise of his. And yes, we do say in the 11 satanic rules of the earth, do not give your opinions unless asked. But as I've pointed out before, if you post something on social media and there is a comment section there, well, then you are effectively asking people for their opinions. Even more so when I explicitly say in every episode of Satansplain, email your comments to me. But as Costas points out, I do disable the comments on the YouTube uploads of Satansplain. And I told him that the reason I do this is pretty simple. The comments section of YouTube videos typically gets abused, and if I didn't turn on comments, then quite frankly, I suspect I'd be hosting 70 different message boards for a mix of spammers, bots, Illuminati seekers from Nigeria, and of course, Jesus freaks with their Bible quotes. People who do these sorts of things obviously aren't interested in the show, and in those cases, comment on the clip without even listening. So, no, I'm not going to give them that pleasure. Costas said YouTube, etc., but honestly, I'm pretty sure YouTube is the only place where I do this. As I say in every episode of Satansplain, you can go to the Satansplain channel on X, you can go to the Satansplain Facebook page, you can go to the Satansplain channel on locals.com, you can email me. So, no, I'm obviously not afraid of people responding back to me. But when most people run into Satansplain for the first time, they're seeing a particular episode being advertised as a YouTube clip. And I'm not going to make it easy for people who see the headline of something they dislike and immediately want to be a douche or otherwise take advantage of it. So that's my explanation. I've got an email next here from Bogues, and this one is kind of an anecdotal, so let's treat this as a satanic anecdote, or as we call them here on Satansplain, Satanecdotes. Cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Bogues says, I was just up at my local Denny's grabbing some breakfast. For those of you listeners outside of the U.S. who may not know, Denny's is a chain of restaurants that kind of specialize in breakfast food. Their address here locally is the number 666 street address. They have never posted that number on their building, of course. Our local football team is called the Demons, and we have a well-known ski resort here called Purgatory, with ski runs that have names relating to hell and other dark themes. Running through the center of the town and all through the valley, we have what's called the River of Lost Souls. All around town, we have little demons with horns, pointed tails, and pitchforks, and he attached some photos in the email to me. And Bogues also mentions that after talking to an employee at that Denny's location, the employee said that the reason why the building number of 666 isn't on the building itself is the same sort of superstitious approach people take to the number 13. But Bogues argues that displaying the 666 would simply make more sense, considering that, after all, the same town has a ski resort named Purgatory, a football team named the Demons, plus a river of lost souls running through the town. So they should play that up, as a tourist attraction, I guess, not to play it down. So that was the email, and I wrote back and I said, ironically, I think omissions like this work from a satanic standpoint, because after all, if the goal is to get customers so that you can make more money, and the business knows that a 666 on the building might deter people from coming in and spending their money, then not displaying it may make more sense. Remember that satanic sin of counterproductive pride. Though I added that it may also just be a general business practice for Denny's to not display their building number no matter what the number is. I don't know. I do know that there are lots of franchises that have certain aesthetic demands and rules like that, where they want all their locations to look the same in certain ways. A year or two ago, my friend Magister Matt G. Paradise was in town and staying in a hotel on floor 6, and we were curious if there was a room 666 on the floor. And amusingly enough, there was not. The rooms came in pairs, and it skipped, I think, both 665 and 666. You'll likewise see hotels that don't have a floor 13 or airplanes that don't have a row 13. I remember hearing a stand-up comedian joke about that many, many years ago, and the joke was basically, hey, when has there ever been a plane crash? And they said on the news, oh, all the people sitting in row 13 were killed. Everybody else was fine. Again, though, I think The reason for this is not because the businesses are superstitious, but rather so that they don't have to deal with the hassle of a superstitious customer, one after another, saying, "Oh, I don't think I could stay in room 666. Can you get me a different room?" By the way, as for the satanic significance itself to the number 666, I talked about that back in Satansplain episode number 57. In short, no, strictly speaking, the number 666 doesn't have any direct significance in Satanism. However, the fact that the world at large thinks it does is something which Satanists can certainly use to their advantage. The fact that so many people still have such a reaction to numbers like 666 or 13 in modern times, even if they're not Christian, I think says a lot. It's not supernatural, but I would argue humans have made something supernormal out of it. One final note I'll add to this is something I like from NASCAR. I'm not really a NASCAR fan, but I love the fact that there is, last I checked, a car number 13. Now, the cars of NASCAR each have sponsors. There are different companies that sponsor each of the different cars. With the number 13 being thought of as unlucky, you would think that no company would dare want to have its brand associated with it. But the sponsors of car number 13 have been insurance companies. So the marketing is clear. You have bad luck, therefore you should buy your insurance. I just think that's brilliant, personally. Mark from New Zealand writes, he says, "I've really been enjoying the Satansplain podcast. Thanks so much for producing this excellent content. A number of my friends have quizzed me in the past about Satanism, and I always direct them to the Satansplain podcast for answers and perspectives. In addition, I encourage them to visit churchofsatan.com, but some of these guys find reading far too much effort. A couple of people have commented that Satanists are, quote, hissing, spitting, vampire-type creatures who dress in black and have no sense of humor. Aha, simple answer, I direct them to the Devil's Mischief podcast and let them figure out that both shows feature the same host. That's been a useful source of debunking the angry goth myth." Well, thank you, Mark, for plugging both of my shows. I recently put out a new episode of The Devil's Mischief, playing some tracks in memory of Bob Newhart and of Martin Mull. You can check that out on RadioFreeSatan.com. I've got a slightly older email here from Sophia, but I wanted to read this particular one on the show. Sophia wrote, "Good evening. I am a frequent listener of the Satansplain podcast. Last night, I rented the Stepford Wives through Hoopla and devoured it in one sitting. While I was reading it, I couldn't help but think of episode number 46 of Satansplain, where you discussed capital of conformity and how it relates to pentagonal revisionism, specifically the part about artificial human companions. I wanted to know if you've ever read the Stepford Wives, and if so, what do you think of it?" So I told Sophia that admittedly I have not read the Stepford Wives, but I do know that the movie version of the Stepford Wives is, curiously enough, on the Church of Satan's suggested film list, and probably for that reason. And I will confess again that I have never seen the movie either. I have it on DVD, but still have not gotten around to watching it. Maybe I should do that this upcoming week. One of these days, I really want to delve into the Church of Satan suggested film list because, well, here's the third confession. I own every single film on the Church of Satan suggested list. I own them on either DVD or Blu-ray. So it was a project I set out to do for myself last year, and I accomplished it. Now I just need to find the time to watch the movies that I haven't watched yet, which is at least half of them. So that will definitely be a Satansplain. There will definitely be a Satansplain episode on that topic on the Satanic Film List one of these days. But it's not going to be this episode. In fact, in the meantime, that's going to do it for this current episode of Satansplain. Thank you all for listening. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information on Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode is copyright 2024, Magister Bill M.